I open the floor to questions from the panel. Yes, Kathy Mikulinski.
I just had a question for Miranda. Cats who come into the shelter often find it as a means to decrease their stress level, the ability to hide in something. How do you manage that with adopters wanting to be able to see the cat and wanting to be able to interact with the cat?
Yeah, that's always a bit of a conundrum. A lot of times what we will try to do is to give the cat a choice to come out, so offer an appetizer or a treat. The cats that have been clicker trained sometimes will bring out the target stick. They know what that is and they'll come out. It's always tough. You want to try to talk to the adopter and give them the explanation of why the hiding box is necessary, explain that it is stressful, but we also want to get the cat out of the shelter. So it is a bit of a challenge to know. There have been some cats that have been overhandled, and we've said, could you please come back in half an hour, go walk around the shelter, let's give the cat a chance to relax. I don't know that there's a good answer for when you choose when to take that cat out or not. It's a question of, is it going to get a home, and that's really what it comes down to. Tough choice.
Is there an optimal timing issue? I heard from numerous speakers today that when a cat first enters a shelter, it's under extreme stress. And you've just, both of you have just described that the longer they stay, it gets really increasing aggressive and depressed. So is there a sweet spot in between where it's at least less bad, where adoption is the most optimally successful?
I would say no, because it's so individually dependent. You have your very bold cats who will come in and be fine that entire time, and one cat who deteriorates over 24 hours. So I don't think that there is a sweet spot unless you're dividing those categories of types of cats down. Then there may be a sweet spot for each group, which I guess means we need a study.
I think we need another study. There's been a great question from the audience. What's the risks and benefits of community housing cats? This group housing must surely bring with it increased aggression, no, or is not? Single housing, you've described the problems. How about group housing? Are there problems, or should we all be doing it?
I think that, first of all, you have to understand that there is some selection about who goes into a colony house situation. So if you have a cat that is obviously aggressive to other cats, that cat is usually screened out of that. I think it's a great question, though, because we do predominantly colony housing. We do provide for individual animal housing at the Tompkins County SPCA. And the worry I have is that the quiet, still cat sitting on a perch at the top, just sitting there, is that cat comfortable? Is that cat stressed? I think that our ability to read what is actually happening with those cats is not as clear-cut, perhaps, in some dogs. And that I think you're going to talk about an area of research. I think that's an area where we need more research, because they may look perfectly okay. And certainly they seem to show better to the public. But there are also some data that says that cats that are moving are more likely to be adopted than those that are not moving. So I'd really like to know more about some of those cats and what proportion of those cats don't do well. I mean, they're not aggressive, but are they doing well?
I hope all the students in the audience are paying attention to all these studies that we're coming up with ideas for. We have about 50 dissertations have been generated already. Barbara Carr.
I'd like to just say about colony housing. I think that I don't see how you can do colony housing unless you have a team of volunteers like the Advocates that can really see that cat on the top shelf, or see the cat who hasn't eaten in 2 days. There are some things, if you're not there observing, that you can get cats in terrible trouble. So yeah, you need volunteers.
That leads me to a question I have. It's a naive question as an outsider. Is there an equivalent for cats to the safer kind of evaluation there is for dogs? Is Advocates the answer to that, or is there some sort of standardized evaluation?
It's highly unlikely that you're going to get a cat that can take a human's throat out. So, you know, the concern is not there about putting safe cats up for adoption. They're either safe or they're not safe with cats, and the not safe ones you try and find a barn home for.
No, I didn't mean safe, I just meant in terms of evaluation for adoptability.
Oh, yeah, meet your match?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Is it dog friendliness in that battery of evaluation?
No.
Should it be?
It should, and that's actually, I think that's one area we need more data on is how do we make, especially since we have more cross-species households, how do we address that in an ethical fashion? You can't use a cat and expose it to risk that's already stressed in a shelter to find out if a dog is going to be safe in that with a cat. Likewise, you can't do the same vice versa. So that ethical question needs to be addressed of how do you get appropriate data that is still reducing risk when you're putting them in a multi-species home.
There was another great question from the audience. It's been suggested that licenses for cats should be instituted to increase responsibility in cat ownership. Do you think this would have a positive or a negative impact on our general relationship with cats and increasing responsibility? Anyone want to vote on that one? Should we have licenses like there are dog licenses?
No.
If you want to read a good response,
This is-
Adlai
this is
Stevenson
Catherine
wrote
Help-
an
and,
essay on that.
I beg your pardon?
Adlai Stevenson wrote an essay on why you should not license cats.
And can you summarize it for us?
No.
That's a very, very succinct summary. I take it the conclusion was you should not. Does anybody want to speak? Any additional?
Not to that, but I have a question.
Yeah, James Serpell.
The provocative question for Barbara. Barbara? A provocative question for you. So, you talked a lot about hoarders and this problem of recidivism in hoarders. Gary Petronak and Mike Moyer coined the term for cat feeders. They were joking, but they used the phrase hoarders without borders to describe a lot of cat feeders. And I wondered to what extent maybe we could treat these repeat offenders in the hoarding community by diverting them into trap, neuter, release type programs as cat feeders. So you give them an outlet, but a harmless outlet for them.
I think that you're certainly on the right track. I think any place that has been successful with hoarders has put some ability for the hoarder to try to make a difference in cats' lives. This fellow that I was talking about that we were successful with, I know we used him in the feral cat clinics you guys did for years. I think his veterinarian worked closely with him, but we had sort of a whole community taking care of this one guy, and the problem is that largely hoarders will see the SPCA or the Humane Society as the enemy, okay? And that's our own fault because all we've done is arrest them over and over again. We try not to do that as much. If that's the only way we can save the kitties or whatever the animal is, then we're going to do an arrest. But it's not the way that we address hoarders anymore. And so we really have to change their opinion of us before we can be in a position to help them or move there. But yes, I think you're on the right track. Anybody else on that? I'm sure a lot of people know about hoarders other than me.
Okay, I have another one. I feel a need to follow up on this news that euthanasia is increasing in this study in Colorado, and then you also hinted in another state as well. You must have some inkling, some thought in the back of your head about why that might be happening. Janet? If you approach it, first off, it may just be a blip and it may not be a trend, but if it also could be, it may just be a devil's advocate. Could it be that there's just increasing efficiency in the system, that increasing ability to recognize non-adoptable cats, increasing recognition of the need for the euthanasia, so might as well get to it? Is that possible? Could it be that?
I don't know what it is exactly. I do worry, it's something I mentioned to a couple of you earlier, and I have no idea whether this is playing into it or not, but we're seeing the cost of veterinary care ever rising. We're getting better technologies, better medications, but most often that comes with an increased cost. And working in a veterinary school, I don't think we give our young veterinarians, I think once you're out, you begin to learn these things, of offering alternatives to the Cadillac care, providing other kinds of maybe not optimal care, but more affordable care. And whether that's playing into animals being brought to shelters, and we have some data from Tompkins County that looks like over the last 2 years, we're getting sicker animals come in. That is, animals that really have an illness and therefore, and in many cases, a chronic illness or something that would require a fair amount of either financial investment or surgery or whatever. And so we're euthanizing some of those because they are suffering and we can't afford the care for them. So whether that is partial explanation, I don't know.
Well, let me,
Wayne Pacelli.
obviously we've had a lot of information about the cat population increasing. So it could be just an absolute increase based on percentage, but I can't believe we're not doing better with cats in general, with all the TNR, with all the new programs that you guys have and so many other shelters have, and the general awareness about cats, more outreach in the community, not passively waiting for people to come to the shelter. I just can't.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, we also have data to show that the adoption rates are fairly flat. That it's not like we're increasing adoptions. So if you get more animals in, but you keep your adoption pretty much stable, then you're going to have maybe more cats, and therefore you can't place them, and you're euthanizing them. That's a good point. That's why it's nice to see them per 1,000 human population, right, which the one was corrected for, but the other was not. So.
Barbara Carr.
I will say that Can't Afford has taken over the #1 spot of why people relinquish their animals at our organization. It used to be moving or allergies, but there's no question that it's Can't Afford. And what they're talking about is veterinary care.
Jerry Zazula.
I was going to also address that. Does anyone know if these cats that are being relinquished to the shelter have seen a veterinarian and gotten a diagnosis of some expensive disease, or even the cost of euthanasia, which is not too small now, and then decided, I'm going to take it to the shelter? I don't know if there's any of that data being collected.
Well, we collect all that data, and I can tell you with owner-requested euthanasia of animals at the end of their lives, 20 to 25% of the animals that we take in are because it's just outrageously expensive to have their animals euthanized, and we'll do it for no cost, right, rather than have the animals suffer.
As a last question in this session, a question from the audience and from me is, given that it's 50 to 70% of shelter cats are euthanized still, is there a realistic roadmap towards a no-kill practice in the foreseeable future? Is it something that is simply an ideal that is actually not a realistic ideal? I know this no-kill issue is such a controversial issue, and I know it's a very emotional issue, but can anyone take a shot at that? Cassie Makalinski.
When we think about how to increase live release rates of cats, that's an equation that has a numerator and a denominator. We have to decrease the number of cats that are coming in, and that involves safety net programs in the community. We also have to increase the number of animals that are leaving alive. So if we want to decrease that euthanasia number, we have to work on both sides of that equation.
Anyone else?
I would just add, we have used traditionally spay-neuter as our primary intervention to reduce intake. There are very few data that demonstrate that our current spay-neuter programs are working to decrease intakes into shelters. And I think, Barbara, you can comment a little bit on your targeted spay-neuter, which I think is probably the way we ought to
really
go.
had a great opportunity to work with the ASPCA last year and do 2 neighborhoods and try and do as many spays and neuters of cats in those neighborhoods as we could. One was directly across the street from the SPCA, so it was very easy to work in that neighborhood. We took, the year that we started the program, we took in 147 cats from that neighborhood. Then we sterilized, I mean, we could go door to door and practically pull the cat out of the house to do the spay or neuter. But 4 years later, we took in 4 cats. 2 of those were owner request euthanasias. One was a stray, and one was, I can't remember, a return. So yes, you can, by targeted spay neuter, I think, really make a difference. I also think that no kill is not out of the question, you know, whatever you think no kill is. And that's healthy animals being, in my opinion, healthy animals being found homes for, and treatable and manageable animals being found homes for. And at our organization, we're 99% there. But that is managed intake. It's incredible adoption programs. It's giving away cats. It's all the things. You have to try everything, folks.
The other
Kathy
point-
Makalinski.
The other point I wanted to make to that, too, is that if you decrease the length of stay that cats are, the time that cats are spending in your shelter, you can increase the number of cats that you are able to help in that community, still get them out more quickly, and those cats that are within your facility, if they're not staying there very long, are not getting ill. They're not developing shelter acquired diseases that require them to be euthanized.
This is great. Now, the question from the audience also expressed a concern about the shelter itself becoming, you know, the equivalent of a hoarding situation. But I think that you're talking about a very optimistic future, because you're laying out essentially, all of you are laying out the right considerations that would go into a framework that will lead to improvements in this throughput process. So I beg your pardon, but we've come up against breakpoint. So so let's stay on schedule, and I will see you back. I see you all back here at 2 o'clock. 10 more minutes.